Thank you very much, and I'm highly appreciate to being here and talking about my research, and also it's a kind of research proposal which is in my mind for the future. What I will present today, it is part of my PhD, part of my current research, and some other thoughts which I would like to extend in the future. So in the next, let's say 1 hour, I'm talking about, as in my title said, the manifestation of anti-Gypsyism, and I try to understand that how Romani people, they were part, or were they kind of target, let's say, of different eras in our history, and how the society saw Romani people in the social science. In my presentation, one second, this doesn't work. Okay, it works. So in my presentation, I have actually 3 main focus. One focus is approaching the terminological notes and the word of politics of Romani people. And I also will talk about the schools, the different schools and thoughts on gypsies and on the critical Romani scholarship, like how from the 1600s, let's say, developed the knowledge on Romani gypsy people until nowadays. Also, I have to note in this point, I'm not using gypsy because I will also explain why. In my presentation and in my talking, if I'm using gypsy, it has psychological, social psychological, or other meanings which an added kind of value for the presentation. Also, I will talk about international movements, how it's developed, and the emancipation of Romani people. And the last part of my presentation will focus on different manifestation of intersectional anti-Gypsyism, which is bring some case studies. And the last point is my conclusion would be. So my key arguments are the following. So in this paper, I'm going to place under debate, as I mentioned, the international development, different eras and position of Romani people in the social science with the lens of academic anti-Gypsyism. My key arguments are that historical inquiry is a way of making the past less distant. It's by default a process of building awareness of unrecognized narratives, reviving forgotten voices, and elevating common remembrances. Romani cultural heritage is influential across the globe. However, in the mainstream academia, their knowledge production and self-representation are lack of recognition. Recognizing Romani history, past events, and lived experiences allows us to cultivate collective memories and consciousness. Understanding Romani history could empower an elevated appreciation of today. My foremost and primary argument is that anti-Gypsyism is a transhistorical phenomenon that comprises special forms of racism and intolerant attitudes towards attitudes that directly affects Romani people regardless the time and places. Anti-Gypsyism is not only transhistorical, but transgenerational as well. Is transgenerational, which is subconsciously deprived Romani people of their own identity, politics, practices, and memories as well. This transgenerational trauma is based on the day-to-day otherings, social distances and exclusions, and on the pejorative thoughts towards those who are known in the public imagination as gypsies. Romani people are facing everyday anti-Gypsyism in the forms of structural racism, profiling, social exclusion, integrational and assimilation policies and practices as well. Considering the structural racism and cultural appropriation and the regular socioeconomic challenges, in my critical point of view, demanding to Romani people not only physically, but psychically and mentally as well. My second argument in this presentation, that Romani academic and activist narratives are often with good intentions, even with good intentions, are vanished, and our memories and voices are silenced based on the patriarchal status quo and power relations. My third argument is that it is timely and essential a critical turn in the Romani scholarship, which requires a process of decolonization and recognition, ergo an evaluation, reframing of Romani histories, memories, and past. This current presentation is supported by reflective queer, post-colonial, and critical Romani scholarship. Few words about the terminological notes and work of politics. As I mentioned, usually I'm using gypsy because in my point of view, gypsy is a slur, which is offending my identity. As a terminological note, at the word of, and the word of politics is my word. I use Romani people identity politics framing, which is not only refers to my individual identity, but also I am arguing that the term of gypsy is the naming of Romani people by non-Romani non-Romani people on the others, whom they defined as gypsy based on their unknown past, socioeconomical backgrounds, cultural heritage, and linguistic patterns as well. Historically and linguistically, in my critical point of view, Romani people never call themselves gypsies. In the public spheres and public spaces, they call themselves gypsies because of the majoritarian expectation, context of assimilation, integration politics, and practices. Therefore, based on the social power, mainly but not only, subconsciously, the self-identification of Romani people frayed and transformed in the past centuries to gypsies. Ergo, the Romani people are deprived from their own self-identification based on exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, cultural imperialism, and violation. In my paper, I would like to also say that there are some trigger warning, let's say. There are words and also frames. There are also stories which would be maybe sensitive for the audience. So that's why I'm calling the attention that it is part of my presentation, and this need to be placed in the context as it is. There is a debate when non-Romani social scientists call Romani people Brussels gypsies, or in other name they calling them or us NGO scientists. So they labeling those Romani scholars who are producing public knowledge and recommendation under different European Union institutions or progressive academic institutions. This labeling refers not only to Romani people who are working on different EU institutions, or it's not only referring to the place where they are working, but also states intolerant attitudes, social distances, and lack of recognition of Romani scholarship. Roma is not only an umbrella term, but what EU policy documents and the discussions commonly employs. In my critical point of view, it is intolerant perception when non-Romani people claims that Romani people call themselves Roma because of their involvement in different EU institutions, and therefore their identity got also politicized and eliticized as well under this umbrella term. So the argument mainly that non-Romani people, they say that Romani people use the self-identification Romani because they became elitist. So I'm not agreeing with that. I argue that the unrecognition and misrepresentation by social science of the Romani identity politics of self-naming is one of the modern forms of academic anti-Gypsyism as well. Generating and promoting the gypsy naming in social science and public knowledge, it is also a manifestation of anti-Gypsyism. Romani people are not only being elitist, to use their own self-definition and naming as Roma. It is form of reclaiming and healing the past identity violations and traumas. If Romani intellectuals and academics criticize this phenomenon, they oftentimes they are forced to leave their own country where they were born because of their diplomas and because of their critical knowledge. because actually with them diplomas, they are not able to enter politically independent research institutions, even they are not hired, and I'm very critical in this point, as a self-stalker in the stores. It is also a question that Romani scholars can have access to different academic institutions. It is also central in the countries where they born or they should leave the country. It is also critical that with their doctoral degrees, they should leave their countries, because that with so-called with their gypsy PhD, countless they cannot count that much as a non-Romani bachelor. When we are taking into the account roughly the last centuries knowledge production on gypsies, we can see that the results are often reflected on external viewpoints and perceptions, which oftentimes presented racist, classicist, and exoticized objectification of Romani people. In my point of view, this hegemonic, frequently dehumanizing stigmatization excluded Romani narratives, representations, and identity politics developments, and limited their access to knowledge production and self-identification as well. Romani narratives and knowledge is forgotten in the legacy shadow of inclusions and assimilation politics, as I mentioned previously. However, recently Romani scholars have reclaimed their awareness, visibility, and places in different academic and public institutions as well. Since Grellman in 783 published his work, and this is my main argument, with the title of dissertation on the gypsies, Romani people are constantly subjected to international scientific racism, which not only embodied several manifestations on the gypsies, but also subconsciously assembled their identities and vanished their narratives from the history. Therefore, I arguing Romani memory is required to elaborate and commemorate with Romani scholars and activist involvements for the future generations. Academic reconciliations are needed for Romani history and memory building. Taking under the loop the development of the international studies on the gypsies versus the critical Romani scholarship, we can define the following schools and eras. So in the next slides, I will talk about these schools, how it's developed, and what was the main approaches of these different schools. Numerous literatures and informal sources have incorrectly, mistakenly argued that the inherent deviance of Romani people is genetically coded. In addition, it is also argued that socioeconomic, cultural, linguistic, and lifestyle elements what are separates Roma from non-Roma. Ian Hancock offers classical examples of Romani people's false portrayals of the privileged majority and notions. One of the most common stereotypical concepts of the Romani people is being or behaving like criminals. Shields and Myers argued that criminalism is part of Romani habits such as murdering, kidnapping, and deceptions. Others are arguing that Romani people's unbalanced identity patterns refers back to the personal hygiene, nomadism, moral, and magics as well. Sarin's works focused on the role of biomechanical genetics of the human groups, much more specifically on Romani genes and tracing the origins of Romani people through genetic studies. So the first school which I'm going to talk about, the gypsyologists, let's say. So gypsyologists approach in the early 1600s states that gypsies are the worst kind of wanderers and impostors springing up from the continent, but yet rapidly spreading themselves through Britain and other parts of the Europe, disfigured by their swarthiness, somber, filthy in their clothing, and indecent. Wow. So as you can see, there is the quote is from Spellman. This is I was earlier discussing. Everyone is arguing or quoting Spellman, but nobody saw the quote. I mean, nobody see the original text. So this is, I think, also we should take in the account that there are texts or there are some narratives which are everybody are quoting, but where are those documents? For example, the Spellman, one of the first who was actually mentioning in social science that these gypsy people are here and they also doing different things in different countries based on linguistic studies and also in ethnographical and anthropological studies. So back to Grellman, and actually Grellman also quoting him, and who quotes George Smith. So there are cross quotes or cross references, but it's very heavy to define like who was actually the first, because in my argument, Grellman was the very first who started to produce knowledge on gypsy people in scientific eras, let's say. But if we are going deeply, and I will show you later on that is not true, because there are different sources which should be researched, and there are narratives which are actually hidden. So back to Grellman. Grellman in 783 states that gypsies are a race of ill-dressed, cheaters and thieves, unsettled wandering robbers. So, I mean, it's nothing new for this, because all these sentences and all these narratives, actually, was very surprising. When I started to read Grellman book, and I mentioned this as well, after 20 minutes, I thought that I totally forgot that I'm reading a text which was written in 780s. It is totally like when you're reading a 20th century text. So just you can jump the time from 700 until today. And if you wouldn't know that the text was written in that time, it's totally applicable for nowadays, let's say. And so I have this pointer here, which was very kind of surprising for me as well. So it doesn't work. Okay, now works. Good. So I brought this picture, and here is this picture, which is, if you see that that is one of the first George Smith actually, who wrote the book of Gypsy Life in 1800s. And it was very surprising to see for me that he brought actually a person who could draw properly, and he made for himself a portrait amongst the gypsy children as he gives food for them. So in this time, I mean, we are talking about different anthropologists and anthropological studies, as you know that, for example, Gertz and others, they went to research the others. But basically before them, there was also a wave when non-Romani researchers, they entered to the Romani camps or Romani settlements, and they started to do anthropological research on Romani people in the early 1800s. So this was very surprising for me, and also it was shocking as well at the same time. So back to this. Hoyland in 1816 in his academic works researched how distinguishable the civilized and superior nation of Europe and the gypsy or a peculiar race. I'm arguing that the school of gypsologists is the foundation of the gypsylorism, which is still an existing school with annual conferences today. As you know, the gypsylorism, let's say, was established in 1888. But there is also, we know these dates, but if we're going deeper into documents, we also can find some other different sources. So on the screen, you can see the dissertation on the gypsies, which is written in 783, but there you can see that 787 because the translation is from 787 to English. And also I just learned today that the second edition is also from 787. So, and yes, so going forward. just few more words about gypsylorism as well. So the area of gypsylorism, instituted with anthropological and ethnographical approaches on gypsies, which are based on the research on the others. That is clear, we know that. The first issue of Gypsy Law Society journals published in 1888, July, with the leadership of David McRitchie, Francis Hinz Grom, and with Richard Burton. In the preface, they wrote, actually, and this is very surprising for me as well, that they state, these are together the new materials to rearrange the old and new formulate results as a little by little to approach the goal, the final solution of the gypsy problem. So they state that they established this journal to support the final solution of the gypsy problem. And if you're thinking about the Romani genocide, I will also later talking about this. They also talking about this. They clearly telling that they referring to the studies that the final solution of gypsy problems. Also, I would like to state back to gypsylorism from gypsylogy, I'm jumping to gypsylorism. So 1 second, I just. So, however, as I mentioned, the first issue came out in 1888, right? But if you're reading more into the Gypsy Law Society journal, the Gypsy Law thoughts refers back to the 1850s. So in 1907, David McRitchie states in the Gypsy Law Society Volume 1, number 1, that in the year of 1851, under the title of Lavarengo, George Borrow published the first section of his remarkable autography. For such, it is a great extent, although interwoven with much that is fanciful and often inaccurate. In 1857, the second portion of Romani Rai made its appearance. This sentence is very important for us, I guess. He said that in 1857, the second portion, so it means the second issue, most probably, the Romani Rai made its appearance. So before the Gypsy Law Society journal, most probably there was one other journal which, with the same authors, with the same group of people who established the Gypsy Law Society, they started to producing knowledge on Gypsy people. And also it's very interesting for me, like we using this term or school Gypsy Law Society, but they state that Romani Rai, which is referring to our identity politics, right? So it means that before the Gypsy Law Society and the Journal of the Funders already in 1850s tried to establish the schools with the name, most probably, the Romani Rai. But this is somewhere hidden in the history. So jumping a bit of time, and here I will be very critical. And this is also, you know, it's surprising, like we are talking like 200 years back. But if you are taking these documents, and I have this study from 2010 or 11 from Marushkova and Popov, the statement completely the same. So the school are same, the thoughts are the same. And I would like to highlight, that's why I was highlighting or mentioning the terms and political notes, why it's important, the Gypsy and Roma differentiation, and how the social scientist calls Romani scholars Gypsy Brussels gypsies, let's say, or gypsies who works in Brussels, and so on and so on, because it is actually stated in research by non-Romani researchers. Many of you know, I guess, know this, but I would like to highlight and read it up. So jumping a bit in time into 2011 from 1850s, so Marushko and Popov states, it can hardly be defined in disciplinary and methodological terms, since it is particular time of research that we call the NGO science. Its representatives may have different academic backgrounds, but often have none, including cases where the only qualified of the authors of this direction is their Roma origin and their mastery of English. So they state that Romani researchers' knowledge are based or only research, only values, let's say, or access to academic knowledge production. It's a mastery of English. I'm denying a bit that. And that's the Romani identity. Furthermore, the inclusion of gypsies as a co-authors of NGO sector publication with claims to be scientific research. My question is, what is scientific research also, and what is objective as well? As a symptom of the de facto public recognition of the rights of gypsies to be researchers or experts according to the accepted NGO terminology. Of course, we wanna have our own visibility. We wanna have our own institution. We wanna have back our own positions and producing knowledge, reframing the history. It is being a Romani scholar. It's not only a job, it's also a social responsibility for me as a person. Because we are like 10, 15, 20. It is a very heavy bag. And arguing with these sentences is very demanding and hurtful. Sorry. So continuing the quote, they state, only by virtue of their origin and not according to their qualification. So we have virtuals, temperature, temperament, but no qualification. Anyway, jumping to the next school, the Gypsy studies and biased and racist studies on Roma. Parallelly with the Gypsy Law Society school strengthened the thoughts of Gypsy studies. In 1863, the New Review, Political and Philosophical and Literature Review, Volume 2, on the Gypsies by Oxford University notes that Gypsies are a distant race without religion and perhaps without morals, also who have centuries among superheroes. Baster, in 1887, expressed that Gypsies are who have no willingness to work but chose to make a profession of illness, stealing, fornication, gluttony, drunkenness, gambling, and alike. In the early 1900s, established the approach of the biased scientific racist studies of Gypsies with the institution of Gypsy Information Service in Lieblich and Lombroso discussed in their work that Gypsy people are unchangeable people of morality, inferior people, and profit as well. So Ritter in 1983 posed the question publicly, what is the way to cause these traveling people to disappear? There is no point in making primitive nomads settle and their children go to the school. Scientific racist and biased studies on Gypsies were developed by criminal biologists in the 1920s, which were adopted over a decade later by racial hygienist Robert Ritter, the leading Gypsy expert of the National Socialist regime. Criminal biology is not only one factor of the Romani genocide, it is sorely encountered with the concept of social Darwinism and the concentration of the criminal police from the 1936, to which Roma and Sinti people were specific targets, therefore, and victims as well. To the final solution, which mentioned in Grellman opening words, to the final solution, which already was suggested by Grellman in 783, had a regenerated voice of Franz Exner one of the Germany's leading criminologists. His textbooks, over 300 pages long, was published in 3 editions in 1939, 44, and 49. While Exner published both books from the Nazi period under the title Criminal Biology, in both in 1939 and 44 edition, Exner treated the criminality of Jews and the Gypsies at the same level. So if we are going forward in the history, we can talk about the school of Romology and Romani studies. In the second half of the 20th centuries of the researchers of Roma, as a reborn of the Gypsy Renaissance, let's say, the Gypsy studies, they went back to the 1800s again. So they applied the same methodologies and approaches like in 1800s, but with different approach to it. Mainly they were focused on cultural anthropological methods, linguistic, sociolinguistical, sociological, and educational approaches. My critical point of view, based on these studies, strengthened the needs and support by the states to segregate the Romani children, to sterilize Romani women, and also the public cleaning and washing in the Romani settlements of India. We have this book from Francesca, in 1996. In her work, she explains as how the stealing and lying are part of the gypsy culture, patterns, and habits. And again, I just want to clarify, the thought also refers to German sentences from 787. So if you take this, which will be when Germans having this exactly same that gypsies are lying only to Gajos, to non-Romani people, and not for themselves.
Dezso, you are muted.
So in Romani studies, with their main focus of political sciences, social psychological approaches, softly, but started to questioning the previous studies on the gypsies. This was a little turning point. When we are going forward, where now? I want to go forward.
Okay, what's happening now?
No, I don't know. Wow, yes.
You need to go down, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. So the last school which I would like to talk about is the critical Romani studies. And I'm very happy to see on the screen Angela, and also here is Marci, who are actually the founders of critical Romani thoughts, one of the founders. So if you deny it or not, it is fact. I'm sorry to say that. So, and please questioning me if I'm wrong with this. And Angela also, please criticize me. So in my point of view, the critical Romani studies not only critically responding and offers methodologies and concepts on ethical research on Roma, but also with this critical reflection produce knowledge which can challenge the previous power positions and relations, status quo images, perceptions with Romani scholars, researchers, and with reflective voices through, for example, with oral history. And here are some publications which are actually written by Romani people for the public as well. Few words about this PowerPoint is based on my PhD, and I try to understand that how historical and social science categorized the gypsies in different times. So not in social science, let's say, but in general public. So as you know that from 1800, for example, wanderers, or for example, in 1940s, they called us socially marginalized group. And also, as you know, many Romani people, they haven't IDs. For example, in Hungary, until 1960s, they had a tattoo in them arm, on the arm. Only after 1960s, they got the same IDs as the non-Romani people. So the Romani people, they had the black IDs, and the non-Romani, they had the brown ID cards, or it looks like, it was looking like as a passport. And as we are going to the timeline, we can see that they're calling us in different times in different names. When they didn't want to call us as gypsies, in the papers, they called us a special stratum, people of cultural poverty, or people of underclass, people of ethnicity, socially disadvantaged people, and so on and so on. But you know, the main thing that everybody knows that these concepts, they say that they are talking about gypsies. They just don't want to name it as the gypsies. And I'm very glad that you are sitting at the moment. The latest, and I'm very surprised as well about this about this naming, the latest naming of our identity, or our group, or of our identity, let's say, the people with broken habits. You know that, right? So, I mean, that is a new one, because it refers that Romani intellectuals, they have a double identities, because we are living in two different worlds, Romani worlds and non-Romani worlds. That's why our identity is broken and our habits are broken. So this is the new or latest. A few words about the international Romani emancipation and movements, how it developed also, because I think these three patterns, the movement, the different historical categorizations, and the different schools are very together alike. So back a bit. So academic and public anti-Gypsyism has a long history and crucial consequences on the Romani Holocaust, but not only on the Holocaust, but also on our daily life and our daily perceptions as well. I argue that Romani victims' narratives and untold memories are vanished, and the Romani victims' persecution, the actions of final solution is based on and generated by the academic anti-Gypsy discourse. Therefore, the social science must focus on recognition and healing of the hidden narratives of the Romani victims. It is fact that Romani people were specifically targeted to extermination, but still there is a controversial debate around the numbers. My question is actually, why do we know how many Romani and Sinti people were victims? And so I would like to maybe answer to this question with another question. Like my question, like who owns history, and how the memory is constructed? Who is charged in knowledge production? And who is charged in building memorials and commemorations of Romani and Sinti people? I think there are not only one history, but more histories, which together has a value for the society. I also argue that the current results, and I'm very critical in this sense, of Romani memories, identity politics, and commemorations are not part of not the results of the Romani history and knowledge production. They are the results of non-Romani perceptions, mainly on Gypsies. When we critically consider the past 50 years, let's say from 1971 until 2021-22, international Romani emancipation and development, we can define the era of the first cultural and identity self-representation as the first generational Romani activists from the 1940s, maybe earlier, until the 1970s. Their main aim were to promote visibility, equality, and dignity to all. They have been granted unitedly the current autonomy and freedom of the Romani arts and culture critical and reflective identity emancipations and leaderships as well. From the 1971, Romani cultural identity politics slightly shifted into political movement and organizational representations, which to the 1990s strengthened to the Romani public civil rights activism and human rights defenders' visibility across the world. In the Romani history was a remarkable turning point when the psychical resilience started to slightly transforming into the psychical resilience into the own knowledge production to combat the structural form of academic anti-Gypsyism, oppression, and fundamental human rights violation. Consequently, the earlier psychical civil rights resistance presently transformed into psychical resilient outbrave. From the 2000s, the third generation Romani human rights activists and scholars' main objectives were to resist the manifestation of anti-Gypsyism and intolerant attitudes with reflective self-narrative knowledge production to talking back to the academia and to the human rights movements as well. In my criticism from 1940s until today, because of the socially normalized anti-Gypsyism and the structured form of social, institutional, and academic oppression and racism, Romani intellectuals hardly had voice and visibility into academic institutions. I brought some sense and some examples of how academic anti-Gypsyism worked. I brought very provocative examples. So these pictures, which I will present, they are from, there was a magazine, Colors, from United Colors of Benetton. They had a magazine. And in the early 2000s, they had a special issue on gypsies. Maybe you know that. So in this journal, they had like 50 different images with different self-narratives, let's say. It's a very good research material, could be actually for the future, like how an institution, or it's a fashion magazine, right? So they just went to Šutorica, to Macedonia, to Gypsy Camp to make a kind of promotion for them brand. And they had also this special issue. So anyway, so they portrayed different Gypsy people, Roma people on the ground. They made photos, and they also brought down the narratives. And then, so my slide doesn't work normally because it should work nicely, and that's why I cannot read now the quote. So you should help me now. Anyway, I will have a bit.
Yeah, what's the PDF now?
Ah, okay. Okay, then I will explain the how I can go back, please. Then I explain the narratives. So here is a person. So he's it's my mistake now. Yes, please. Because I didn't write on my paper the narratives.
Just the PowerPoint.
Okay, good. Thanks. And how I can move on this?
You can just press delete and then it will go.
Okay, it's also a good look. So this narratives is
sorry, we don't see.
Oh, they don't see
see
that.
the picture.
Oh. Maybe if you move like half and half.
Yeah, it's better. Yes.
You need to change the part of the screen that you're sharing. So you would have to put
Ah,
on the
okay.
first one and then do it again for this one.
Let's delete these ones all.
No, it's okay. Then let's go back. I will
Okay.
try to explain in my own words. It's
Okay.
fine. It's
So with this or?
yeah, it's okay. Good. So this person is explaining when he was photographed that he hopes that his outlook and his face, it looks as a non-Romani person, as a Gajo person, because if his face and outlooks would look as a Gajo person, then the society would accept him more. And therefore, he doesn't denying actually his identity as a Romani person, but if he would change, he would change it. The second narratives is actually, it happens in a hospital when Romani people, they wanted to access to mental health treatment, let's say. And when they enter to the doctors, to the hospitals, the Romani doctors, they describe to the Romani people diazepam only, which doesn't treat actually any kind of other treatment, let's say. So with this sense, even though if they went to the hospitals and they wanted to have access to the healthcare, they were refused because of their identity. They also said that the Romani people, they entering the hospitals and then instead of equal treatment, they subscribe for them B2 vitamins and diazepam because it is could be only affordable for them. And the third one is about a person who is a transgender person, but in the narratives it's called Putzka, which means homosexual. And then the person explains like he's a sex worker as well, Romani transgender as well. And he explains that they don't have access to HIV, to prevent HIV and STDs, for example. And even though if he would like to, or the person would like to have access for protection, the person cannot avoid. And actually, the person also explains that the system, the social system, is also not giving access to the protection for them. And therefore, so the person is forced to do sex work in the case to have an income. But many clients of the person having or asking service without protection. And if they don't have protection, if there is no protection, there is a high risk of getting different disease. And also the person talks about how her body is actually used by men, let's say, but only in private places. They would never go with the person in public because they would shame or deny them. So there are many layers of anti-Gypsyism which are hidden in our narratives, but they are existing. And then also I would like to have other narratives. The narratives is about maybe trauma, resilience, and healing. It's about in Hungary, it's a person. The person who was living in a low socioeconomic status. The person was living in a 50 square meter stable with in a Romani settlements. The father was alcoholic. The mother was working in different labor, day labor. The person also had 3 siblings from previous father. The person mother died when he was 6 years old because of a wrong medical diagnosis. So basically, the mother went in time to hospital, but the doctor said that she is pregnant, therefore she is totally fine. Anyway, the mother is died. And because of the person are from different Romani groups, so there were a kind of social distances between Romani groups, the father and mother. Therefore, the father next day, he kidnapped the child, and later on, to have some income or some daily meal, he started to rob her and do different things to have access for food. And that's why the father got arrested. And the child became homeless for 3 years, at least. In that time, the child had no education. He was living on the street. He was begging and tried to survive in a daily manners, let's say. And one day, the police accidentally find him on a train station during begging, and they placed back to his mother's side of the family. But because of the child's putative femininity and vulnerability without parents, he was also oppressed by the family's members. That's why when he had the chance at the age of 16, he packed his stuffs and he left to a boarding school. But previously, the child, he was attending only in segregated schools. And also he went to a very low level secondary school, let's say. The child started to work in different night shifts, different factories. And then he got a mentor teacher who encouraged the person to apply to the university. The person went to the university with some miracles and mentors as well. During the time, the person had a social distance from the families, but in years later, he noted that his sister committed suicide because of the different social oppressions in families. And then the child also applied in different schools. He became quite critical in social science. And that is me. So the child is in front of you, or the person is in front of you. And I just hinted my personal story because I believe, and also all of us have this kind of stories, believe me, like most of us, most of the Romani researchers, sadly. This is just only my story, but there are also stories. And I'm brave enough to share it. Not because I want to be superstar, I am already, but I'm joking. But just to show that how our narratives or oral histories or memories and critical voices could be channeled in the social science. Of course, I will not channeling now, as it's a kind of private note now to this event. Just I wanted to show like why it's important, our own narratives. And is it Kant? Should be Kant, or should we divide, or should we forget our past and just having a suit and tie and having mulled wine on the street? I mean, can we deny our past and memories? My mother traumas or my ancestors' traumas are my current healing and resilience as well. And also it's very funny because I mentioned before I came here that I find a book which was written in 1984. It's very funny. So just imagine that you are researching in a library and accidentally you saw your mother picture on the book that she's pregnant. And I'm not sure that my mother knew about that she was photographed in a gypsy, cultural event with my father. Anyway, I asked, later on, I met with the author and I asked them, like, did you know that, or did you think that somehow, somewhere in some universe, somebody will questioning you, like, why did you take that photos? And maybe an ancestor, which is very rarely, could ask this question, like, what kind of harm you could cause with this non-true, let's say, non-true knowledge production on gypsies. And the person said he doesn't care, clearly. Anyway, conclusion. So, my conclusion in few words. Academic and activist discourses, even with good intentions, as I mentioned, often reproduce othering images on Roma, narratives of underclass, ethnic minority, disadvantaged group. Catch-up plays such a role as well. Critical self-narrative are necessary to analyze the social and historical embeddedness of such categories and distances of Roma or Gajo and Gypsy or peasants, right? In case when the scientific discourse is about the underclass, the poor, the minority, the disadvantaged, the catch-up, the ethnicity, everyone clearly knows that the talk is about the Gypsies. Taking under critical comprehension the Romani representations and visualization, it is essential to acknowledge the Romani memory, academic, cultural, and life experiences. It is a constant dilemma as the alliances, even with supportive intentions, can lead the Romani knowledge production and representation, or with that position, they are recolonizing the identity politics, scholarships, and emancipations of Romani people. The academic social paradigms and schools on Gypsies from the 16th centuries until the late 2000s are based and constantly developed by non-Romani people. Currently, the social science should talk about the presentation on the Gypsies instead of representations of Romani people in academia. Therefore, the results of the Romani people are mainly perceptions on the Gypsies, which based on the relation and connections between the dominant group and the subaltern power, social power relations. Currently, the Romani scholars are not working in international research and political institutions because of their advantageness, but because of with their papers, they are not good enough for self-stalkers in their own home country. So these were my critical thoughts and my personal thoughts as well. I hope I was challenging some of your thoughts, and I hope I will get some questions and critical feedback as well. Thank you very much.